Welcome everyone, welcome to the Kitchener Centre Debates. I am your host Laura May Lindo, and we are here on land held down, cared for, loved and stewarded by the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe and the Neutral people. Candidates running in Kitchener Centre are Ashlyn Clancy for the Green Party of Ontario, Colleen James for the Ontario Liberal Party, Brooklyn Wallace for the Ontario NDP, Rob Elliott for the PC Party of Ontario, Paul Simoes for the New Blue Party, Sebastian Butner-Stoica for the Ontario Party, and Christopher Noon as an independent. And we will begin the debates today with opening statements. We'll start with you, Ashlyn.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I appreciate everybody tuning in. I really love to see thoughtful voters paying attention to their candidates and making thoughtful choices. I'm here to you today as a neighbor living and raising my kids in Kitchener Centre. I've served this community as a school social worker, as a settlement worker, as a city councillor, and I've served this community as MPP since 2023. I'm so proud to have worked diligently to push back against the Ford agenda. When I knock on doors, I hear that people are struggling to pay the bills. We know that 50% of Canadians are struggling to pay for the roof and food. So I've made a commitment during the by-election, and I have followed through on those commitments and bring that pledge to you today to address the unaffordability of a roof and food in this community, with double people using a food bank and double people homeless in 3 years facing homelessness. I got my first bill passed with all 4 party support. I put forward legislation to end illegal renovictions, stop above guideline increases, and bring back real rent control so people can budget. I've lobbied successfully for funding for school nutrition. I heard from teachers crying that they couldn't afford to feed the school. I brought a letter to the minister. I spoke up in question period. I met with the minister, and we now have $108 million that will be invested in school nutrition this year. So no child in Ontario has to face the reality of being hungry at school. I'm proud to always put the voice of my constituents ahead of partisan politics. I'm looking forward to continue to serve you as MPP and to ensure that everyone in our community has a roof and food, and our children and our neighbors will always look forward to a future where they have a place to live and a livable planet. I'm grateful to have served you and to serve you in the future and be your voice and fight for fairness at Queen's Park, your independent voice for Kitchener Centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashlyn. And now over to you, Colleen.
Good afternoon. Thank you. And thank you to those that are tuning in. Thank you to fellow candidates who are here for this important discussion and conversation. My name is Colleen James, and I'm the Ontario Liberal Provincial candidate for Kitchener Centre. I was born and raised in Kitchener Centre. Kitchener is home. It has always been home. I currently serve as your regional councillor, navigating all of the crises we're having now, homelessness, our health care. I have been committed to this community. I have advocated for transit initiatives. I have advocated for investment in overlooked and under-resourced groups within our community. I have fought and tried tirelessly to ensure that we are moving the needle. And that is what I do, and that is what I will continue to do as your MPP. Beyond politics, my career as a consultant, an educator, and an advocate is shown through and through in the work that I do with organizations to understand the importance of what it means when all of us thrive in a community that we are committed to. I have 18 years of government experience working at the municipal level and a long time ago at the provincial level. And I understand how these systems operate. And I understand that right now, status quo is not going to get us the solutions that we need as a community to move us forward. After 7 years, things have gotten worse. Status quo isn't working. I am seeing this firsthand as I navigate and deal with the affordability crisis on our residents at a table where we are being asked to do more with less and with zero support. Kitchener Centre deserves a strong and firm voice and someone who has proven to get things done and to fight for the communities, all of the communities, and have better outcomes. I want to represent you all. I want to continue to represent you all, but I want to ensure that we get out of this crisis that we're navigating. I look forward to today's discussion, and I'm honored to be standing here as your candidate for Kitchener Centre today.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Unfortunately, Brooklyn Wallace was scheduled to be with us and was unable to make it, and so she has actually submitted her opening statement via video.
Hi there, my name's Brooklyn Wallace. I am running for the Ontario NDP here in Kitchener Centre, and I want to thank you for having me and apologize for not being able to be there in person. I am a housing rights, a 2S LGBTQ, and environmental and voting rights activist here in the region. I first got involved in politics because a couple years ago, there was an encampment of just a few people that was bulldozed using an actual bulldozer. And I got mad and no one could stop me. Since then, I have been involved in every aspect of this city, from beginning a tenants' rights union because affordable housing was being turned into a parking lot, to joining the Climate Change and Environmental Committee at the City of Kitchener. And now I am stepping up to run for MPP because, like many in the city, I am feeling the affordability crisis. Because like many renters in this province, I am not being cared for. And in fact, we are being abused by Doug Ford and his policies and the policies enacted by previous Liberal governments. The NDP is a party by people, for people, made of people. We will fight to keep people with disabilities out of legislated, mandated poverty. We will fight to make schools accessible again, and we will fight to prevent US-style healthcare from entering and ruining the Ontario healthcare system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brooklyn, and we're ready to dive in. A call for supportive housing has been made across Ontario and especially within Kitchener Centre. Will you push for increased provincial funding for supportive housing, and what would that push look like? We'll start with you, Colleen.
Thank you for the question. Supportive housing, deeply affordable housing is something that we are navigating at the regional table, where we know that there is not enough supports needed to provide the resources to build supportive housing. This is something that I will absolutely push for and that our party is pushing for. We want to make sure that we are able to build supportive wraparound houses in this community for what's needed. One of the things and a few of the things that we plan to do in order to make this easier is to stop development charges on new middle-class housing to add up to $175,000 on homes. We want to make sure that renting is more affordable and introduced a fair phased rent control, reviewing the landlord and tenant board. One of the things about wraparound housing and supportive housing, though, is it's a public health. It falls into our healthcare and our need to invest in our healthcare system to ensure that we have enough family doctors, we have enough nurse practitioners and enough teams to support the need that is growing in the concern. And I will tell you, we have a housing plan, homelessness plan at the region of Waterloo. And as a result of the lack of government giving the funding needed, we have put that onus on taxpayers, $188 million essentially on taxpayers. That should not be okay. These are things that the province should be mandated to do. We are the supportive manager, and as your MPP, I want to make sure that the province is doing what they're supposed to do to support the supportive housing needed for those that are living rough and those that are transitioning and getting out of situations where they need a safer space to be.
Thank you, Colleen. Over to you, Ashlyn.
Thank you so much. In our community, we've seen a doubling of homelessness in the last 3 years. Double. We can't keep up. The Ontario Greens are the first party to put forward a costed plan. There are a few gaps in our system that have made this homelessness crisis a reality. One, the government got out of the business of housing in the 90s. The federal government and the provincial government chose then to stop funding affordable housing and basically abandoned low middle income people in this province. We know that 90% of affordable housing was built before 1995. So Greens believe we need to get back in the business of building housing. We commit to building 250,000 affordable houses and 60,000 supportive units. We know 81,000 people are homeless at this moment. So we need to be bold, we need to be strong, and we need to dig in deep to make sure we fund solutions. We know shelter beds are not a sustainable answer. November comes at the same time every year, and every year we're short. So not only do we need to make sure housing first is the solution, but we need to be sure that people can count on housing security. I see in my community that for every affordable unit we build, we lose 39. That is a hemorrhaging. So that's why I put forward legislation, and we will keep fighting for that legislation to stop the renovictions that are plaguing our community and get those bad actors out of our community and hold them accountable for the massive issues they've caused, from renovictions, above guideline increases, and we will bring back real rent control so people can count on a roof and food. And finally, we know that the math just doesn't add up. On Ontario Works, you get $370 to pay for shelter. There is nothing available in our community for that. So we need to double OW and ODSP to ensure that people have what they need to pay for a roof and food.
Thank you, Ashlyn. We're now going to move into renovictions. Renovictions, for those watching, are when landlords evict tenants under the guise of renovations to raise the rent. And this issue is growing across the province. In 2021, Bill 58, Rent Stabilization Act, was tabled, and it aimed to curb this practice, but it failed to pass. Would you support similar Ontario legislation, and how would you work to protect tenants? And we'll start with you, Ashlyn.
Thank you. This has been a passion of mine since I started campaigning for the municipal election in 2022. I went to a townhome complex in Blucher because a friend of mine was being impacted by a bad acting landlord who was forcing her out of her home illegally. So what happens with a renoviction? It's an N13. You can print it off the computer. It's that easy. You can hand it to someone and say, you have to be out by the end of May. So many people don't realize that they have rights, they have options, and they can push back against this gouging that's happening, this flipping, where people buy the affordable stock in our community because we've built so little in the past decades. And they flip that. They put on a coat of paint and a dishwasher, lying to that person about their need to leave in order to renovate. And soon enough, that unit is re-rented at double or triple the cost, and that person is out on their butt. In our community, we have a 0% vacancy rate of affordable housing. So when somebody loses their affordable unit, they have no options. So yes, I support the Rent Stability Act, and that's why I put forward my Keeping People Housed Act. We need to be sure that we bring fairness back to the rental sector. I've also done significant amount of lobbying to fix the Landlord-Tenant Board. The Landlord-Tenant Board is flawed for landlords and it's flawed for tenants. I've seen tenants. I had a man who gets an N13 every time he finishes at the LTB. He gets a new one. He had a heart attack because his landlord was making him fear homelessness, people having panic attacks. We need to hold these bad actors accountable. We've only seen 4 landlords pay on average $5,000 in the last 4 years for illegally renovicting people. We should not be, as property tax owners, paying for this injustice. We need to get these bad actors out of our rental market and restore fairness to the Landlord-Tenant Board. We commit to bringing those wait times back to a month. They've grown to a year. So that means small landlords aren't wanting to go into the business of renting, and those tenants are facing stress of homelessness for a year.
Thank you, Ashlyn. Over to you, Colleen.
Yes, so I absolutely support the rent stabilization and ensuring that we are protecting those most vulnerable. One of the things I'm conscious of, especially when it comes to renoviction, is the impact on seniors in our community. We know that seniors are going to be the biggest hit by renovictions in the next few years. This also falls into a health crisis as well, and ensuring that there are health supports for that. What we plan to do and what our party plans to do is to make rent more affordable. We're going to introduce a fair, phased-in rent control, resolve the landlord and tenant board. We know that it's delayed. I have families as well who are going through this process. It's taking years on both the renter side and the landlord side. We are going to streamline that process. We're going to make sure that it is not a year or two that people are waiting. And we're going to ensure that there is a rental emergency support for tenants, because one of the things as well is that there are no supports for the tenants as they're trying to transition into new homes or find a new home. So we are going to make sure that there is a rental tenancy emergency fund that is established. The reality is that there are policies that are 30 years outdated when it comes to rental, landlord, tenants. And, you know, as we have an affordability crisis, we've seen those renovictions happen even more. We know that people are struggling on both sides, paying their rent and actually paying their mortgages as well. We need to address the affordability crisis, and we also need to ensure that there are policies that are redesigned that are reflective of today and not 30 years ago. It's one thing to say we want to do something. It's another thing to be in a position to do it. As somebody who is also a former landlord, there is policies in places that if you own property before a certain year, you only get to raise your rent by a few percent. If your property is after, I think it's 2018, 2022, the rent control doesn't exist. We need to streamline these processes so that people are protected. We also need to address the affordability crisis, and our property taxes aren't helping right now.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Just recently, the point-in-time count was conducted by regional staff and community organizations right here in Waterloo Region. The number of individuals experiencing homelessness in the region has doubled since 2021. What would your party do to reverse this trend? And we'll start with Colleen.
Okay, well, again, this comes big to, so we have 2,300, our pit count, and that to me is an estimate because we don't know how many people are on couches and they're couch surfing. We have an excellent plan in the region of Waterloo on our plan to end chronic homelessness. One of the things is to make sure that it's invested in, to make sure that we have the supports needed to ensure that our people who need to transition are actually supported. It comes back to the wraparound services. We also need to consider the gender-based element to this. We do not have any supports that, well, there's one, but we do not have enough supports that address gender-based violence and the need for supports for women and children who are transitioning and need a supportive system. We will ensure that we have those supports invested in and making sure that, if we don't address the healthcare crisis, this will exacerbate. Because we know that mental health supports are needed. We know that there are addiction supports that are needed. This also falls in line to the gap that we have in our system right now where people don't have anywhere to go and anyone to turn to. And if we want to ensure that we have less homelessness and remove it, we also need to look at the culturally responsive, because what is not spoken about when we think about homelessness and our plan to end homelessness is desegregating that. Looking at Indigenous populations, looking at racialized populations, new immigrant populations, as well as those who are Black, and then adding in the nuance, because we know that it is way more complex than just finding a house for somebody. What are the supports that are needed? We've committed to investing in those supports as healthcare is our number one, and it is all connected. These are systems approaches that are needed and connected and redesigned. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Over to you, Ashlyn.
Thank you. One of the biggest things at the Landlord Tenant Board is folks not being able to pay their rent. Again, we'll double OW and ODSP. This isn't just my idea. It was called for by our food bank. They see how 40% of the people who use the food bank are on ODSP. We're seeing more seniors on a fixed income looking at shelter beds as their reality for their golden years. We see newcomers, folks with disabilities, folks with mental health and addictions needs in their communities. So first, we need to make sure that people can pay their rent. And sometimes people need a top up. So our party will fund that top up to ensure that low-income folks have enough to pay their rent. We will increase the funding for women's shelters. What I heard when I toured our women's crisis services of Waterloo Region is that they're able to serve less people because there's nowhere for anyone to go. So that's why we will commit to 250,000 new affordable homes and 60,000 supportive homes. We need to ensure that the supply is there so that after people have fled a violent relationship, they can access the housing they need. We also know that Indigenous and racialized people need supports that are specific to them, and our party, with our costed plan, commits to investing in Indigenous-led, Indigenous-focused housing, and those for vulnerable populations. We also know that group homes and residential services are frozen, have been frozen for 15 years from our developmental services. So we need to be sure that those supports are there. As parents age, that they know that their child, their loved one, has the support they need when they are aging out or when they can no longer care for them. Too many seniors as well are experiencing homelessness because oftentimes they can't function on a fixed income or in their home, and they don't have the supports they need. Too many seniors are in the hallways, and we have to be sure that we have the alternate level of care so everybody can successfully transition into a home that they can afford with the supports they need.
Thank you, Ashlyn. We've seen a rise of encampments across the province as well. Do you support the forced removal of encampment residents? And do you believe that temporary designated encampment sites with sanitation and support services should be one idea to be explored? And if you do have other suggestions, now's your time to share them. We'll start with Ashlyn.
Encampments are the reality of a failed government. I don't think anyone, except for maybe the billionaires of Ontario, think that life is better under this government. This is unprecedented. We have 81,000 people who are living unsheltered, and we have 1,400 encampments all across the province. This is a reality that we are facing now because of a province that has abandoned us, abandoned low middle income people, abandoned those who have disabilities, abandoned seniors, folks with addiction and mental health. We need a deep investment in treatment. We cannot just bank on moving people around from place to place like whack-a-mole. I do not agree with fining $10,000 to someone who is living in a tent. They're not living in a tent because they have $10,000. And I don't believe jail is the answer. I think what I hear from the wonderful partners in our community that are working on the front lines is they need relief. They need support to do what we know they can do. We need to properly fund these co-ops and not-for-profit organizations that are delivering these services every day. We need to invest in companies like Indwell and the Working Center who are building more units as we speak. But we need to keep people housed. When people lose their shelter, they get very sick very fast. We know their mental health and possibly addictions go into the toilet when you're living in a shelter or you're living on the streets and you're cold. The answer is not jail. The answer is a caring, housing-first approach, and we need bold solutions. We know that there are vacant units. We know that we can open up supply to address the shortage of housing in this province. We have the lowest housing starts in all of Canada, so we are not getting it done. And that's because there is red tape out the wazoo to building that affordable, missing middle housing that we so desperately need, and including these developers in our housing mix. And finally, we can use creative models like modular housing and alternatives to bring units online as soon as possible.
Thank you, Ashlyn. Over to you, Colleen.
Okay, so can you repeat the question again?
Of course I can. We've seen a rise of encampments across the province. Do you support the forced removal of encampment residents, and do you believe temporary designated encampment sites with sanitation and support services should be explored, and also open for any other suggestions?
Thank you. So I absolutely do not support the removal of people from encampments. I think finding people who, are unhoused due to a myriad of reasons doesn't solve anything. What we've seen and what we know to work is our multi-model type of homes. Okay, we have implemented our tiny homes. We have that model. We also have the managed encampment. These are not perfect. These are not perfect solutions, but they are helping people to be housed. And we have to also think about the way we think about how people are housed, because I think that definition has changed and is not current to time and place. Modular homes, for example, are a model that could be used, that could be invested in. I know firsthand that we are not getting the support from the province to help as we try and build more smaller homes, more supportive homes. We cannot be finding people. The reality is many of us are probably 1 or 2 mortgage payments or rent payments away from being unhoused. So the people who are unhoused or couch surfing, it impacts every single one of us. It is part of the affordability crisis. We've committed to doubling ODSP to ensure and to indexing them to inflation, which is also key because people also don't talk about the inflationary impact as well in terms of ensuring that there is, reduction of what people are paying. We're limiting and we're removing the provincial portion of the hydro and heat. Things that that are top of mind for people when they're having to decide between food or their heat or their rent. I have been successful in ensuring that organizations like the Food Bank get 1.5 million in perpetuity. These are responsibilities that technically should not be falling on our taxpayers at a regional level, but they need to be addressed provincially. And we hear silence, and this can't continue. We need people there to understand the realities municipalities are facing.
Thank you, Colleen. The closure of safe consumption and treatment sites has deeply impacted the people of Kitchener Centre. Do you support this closure? If so, why? And if not, what concrete steps do you plan to take to address this? And we'll start with you, Colleen.
Yes, I think that it was a complete misstep to close their CTS that has been successful. 0 deaths coming from the CTS. That CTS has the ability and has been employing people who otherwise would not be employed. So then, helping the economy. There are staff there that are doing the work. What this has resulted in and what this will result in is more dependence on our paramedics, more dependence on our police, more dependence on our hospital systems that already cannot support the need that exists right now. This was a bad call by the Ford government. The reality is if we had people that were there to speak to the realities of what we have to navigate, and the experts, not listening to any experts, not listening to people in community, we would not be in a situation right now where people are in fear. They're in fear because they don't have the supports that they need. We would ensure that any decision, especially regarding communities when it comes to CTS, when it comes to having the support needed, is done with in a thoughtful way that incorporates in inclusive decision making and informed decision making, because the model works. The model works, and the amount of effort that went in within the communities to determine the locations. It is a complete disrespect to us, to disrespect to those who are navigating a table. I sit on the Board of Health at the region of Waterloo, and we're hearing firsthand the impact that this is having, and knowing that the letters, all of the emails, all of what we're sending, calling for help, it's not being heard, it's not being returned. And now we have a situation where there are people in fear. What we will make sure to do is for any decision, like the previous Liberal government that supported CTS and made sure that there was that start to it, this doesn't happen. This devastation does not continue to happen for those that are essentially the most vulnerable in our community.
Thank you, Colleen. Over to you, Ashlyn.
Thank you. Yes, our party is officially, as a party, clearly against the closure of the safe consumption sites. I have done a lot as MPP to push back against this harmful rhetoric, talking about drug dens and talking about some of the ways that they feel they would solve the problem, like sending folks to jail. We know that this isn't the answer. Instead of dividing our community and looking at the healthcare of folks facing addictions and mental health and dividing us and looking at healthcare as this is good and this is bad, we need to ensure that all the decisions we make as elected officials are rooted in data and rooted with care and compassion. I want to thank Sanguine, who has operated this facility for a very long time. They welcomed me in multiple times to see how this functions. And it was healthcare. It was stigma-free healthcare. As a social worker, I know that what we need first for someone to take that first step toward recovery, first step toward health, is to be in an environment that's free of judgment and meets them where they're at. And that's what I've done as a social worker who worked with kids who have dropped out of school, is I have to meet someone where they're at and see the worth and dignity in themselves. And so I thank the staff, the frontline staff who've done that for so long across our community. I'm worried about them. They're scared that they'll face so many rampant deaths like they did during COVID. I'm proud as your elected official to have supported the Heart Hub application of community health caring and the House of Friendship. We have gone from $1 million from our CTS to $5 million for the Heart Hub. But again, there's a gap. The CTS closes in March, and we don't have a date for this Heart Hub to be open. So people are left with nothing, and that's unacceptable. And that's correct. This falls on property tax owners. We've seen the City of Guelph spend $500,000 to invest in paramedic services to pay for what they see as a rise in infection and a rise in overdose. And that will hit our emergency rooms, it'll hit our frontline responders, and that's not okay.
Thank you, Ashlyn. As of July 2024, 2.5 million people across Ontario did not have a family doctor. How would you increase access to healthcare professionals in our community? We'll start with you, Ashlyn.
Thank you. I am on the Social Policy Committee, and so I had the honor of debating our healthcare budget. Ontario comes last. We come last in the amount per person we spend on hospitals, and we come last in the amount per person we spend on their healthcare. And I asked the Minister, Sylvia Jones, why are we last? How is this okay? And she said we're running an efficient healthcare system. And I told her that not one person has come into my office, my constituency office, and said, wow, Ontario has such an efficient healthcare system. We know that with privatization, we are spending more per capita and we are getting less. So while there is unprecedented amounts that we spend on healthcare, yes, we want to cut a ribbon, we want to expand our hospital and build that hospital in Waterloo, but we also have to pay the staff and put the lights on and stop the burnout of our healthcare professionals. I went to our family medicine school in downtown Kitchener and asked the students studying family medicine what they needed. They told me that 50% of their colleagues in medical school are not going into family medicine because it is a recipe for burnout. The Ontario Greens commit to getting rid of the administrative burden that keeps people from practicing family medicine. We will not nickel and dime them so that they get charged every time somebody goes to a walk-in clinic. We'll bring them relief by building team-based care and ensure that everybody has access to a family doctor in the next 3 to 4 years. We will also expand family medical seats in the province of Ontario and ensure that nurse practitioners, internationally trained doctors, and other paramedicine professionals have access to use their full skill set. They should not be driving cabs or working concierge at an apartment building. Let's make sure we utilize the talents and gifts of all people, including new immigrants in our community. And finally, we need to ensure that people have a roof and food. This is a prevention mechanism that we need to focus on.
Thank you, Ashlyn. Over to you, Colleen.
Healthcare in this province is at a crisis. As said, 2.5 million do not have a family doctor. In the next 4 years, that's projected to go to 4 million. This party, the Ontario Liberal Party, this is the #1 priority for us, is to ensure that we have a healthcare system that works. The Ford government has failed us. We have currently, in this community alone, in Kitchener, 20,000 people that they do not have a family doctor. In the entire region, we have 123,000 without a family doctor. We're about to go to 1 million people in a few years. What is this going to say about the future of this community and the supports needed to address all of the other factors impacting us in affordability if we don't have a healthcare system that works? We have committed to ensuring that we have doctors for everyone in the next 4 years. And people ask, well, how are we going to do this? Right now, we have doctors who are living abroad, Canadian doctors. We're going to bring them back, incentivize those doctors who live abroad to come home. Come home, and we need the services here. We also know that there are internationally trained doctors who are driving cabs. I spoke to a resident the other day who was so upset because she met someone who was trained in the Dominican Republic and cannot practice here. We're going to streamline that. We're going to make sure that we add at least 1,200 qualified and experienced internationally trained doctors. And we also need to recognize that that removes a systemic barrier, because it's a systemic inequity why we have internationally trained doctors who are not practicing here and that are passionate. We are going to eliminate the fax machine, that administrative burden. I was on a call with the president of the OMA yesterday, and he had his laptop. He said, this is the problem. We don't have enough time to do what we need to do. And so as a result of that, you have doctors who are burning out, doctors who are closing their practices. That is not okay. If we address our healthcare system, which we've committed to do and what we're in the best position to do, a lot of the societal issues that we are facing in crisis as we are navigating will be reduced or eliminated.
Thank you, Colleen. During the last provincial election, promises were made to eliminate doctor shortages, to eliminate hospital hallway medicine, and to reduce hospital emergency room wait times. However, these issues persist and are in fact getting worse in many hospitals. If elected, what steps will you take to push for meaningful improvement of our healthcare system? We'll start with you, Colleen.
Yeah, I think this continues on with the need for family doctors. If we have family doctors to meet the needs of residents, we won't have that backlog and wait times. I was speaking to a resident the other day. He took his son to the hospital. 12 hours the first day he was waiting. The next day he came back, he had to wait 15 hours. He didn't sleep for 59 hours. If we have family doctors to meet the needs of the residents, that's eliminated. Spoke to another resident the other day who broke his leg. He was told to go to the States because he'd have to wait 6 weeks for surgery. Once we have family doctors to meet the needs of the community, those wait times will be reduced. It also means that you have to build teams. So nurse practitioner teams. This is an all hands on deck as it comes to our healthcare, and our hospitals cannot afford to, they cannot afford to keep failing our residents and those who need the service because of lack of investment, which this province has, committed billions of dollars to things, spas and beer in corner stores, when we have a healthcare crisis that spans from newborns all the way up into seniors and those aging in our communities who cannot get the support that they need. Our government is committed to do this. We've got the skilled people on our team to ensure this happens, and we work with those who are right on the ground. So when it comes to those hallway wait times, it's all connected. It is absolutely connected to the lack of family doctors and those that are burning out, and the need to streamline international doctors to open practices and incentivize. It also has to do with the fact that we have a government that does not look at healthcare as a priority, and we are committed to it. It is our priority to ensure that we remove that backlog, we invest in family doctors, and we fix this system back to basics.
Thank you, Colleen. Over to you, Ashlyn.
Thank you. As MPP, I have taken on an effort to work across party lines to make sure I'm delivering for my community. So I hustle. I have coffee with people of all political parties so that when my community needs something, I can go to bat for them. So I don't spend my time screaming across the aisle, but rather trying to work collaboratively to address the issues of our time, because that's what my community expects of me. We need a new hospital. We have the land, and we are waiting to merge, and we are waiting to get that funding. And so I will hustle to make sure that we deliver a hospital to the Waterloo region to address the overcapacity of our current hospital. We have demands on the emergency room like never seen before. We see an increase of 25 to 30% in the wintertime of folks looking for a place to stay warm. So when we address homelessness by building 250,000 units and 60,000 supportive houses, it will offload the pressure of our emergency rooms. We need to treat nurses with respect. Bill 124, that was an illegal act to override collective bargaining agreements and force a 1% wage increase on our COVID heroes. We called them heroes, and then the government does this action. So we need to encourage more people to get back into the business of nursing, but we also need to make sure that they have reasonable ratios. They're worked off their feet. They can't even have a meal. So let's make sure that the nurses and doctors that work in our healthcare system are treated with respect and given a workload that is manageable. We need the increase of family doctors. We need to invest in team-based care, address the burnout and workload of family doctors, and expand this practice all across the province. We also need to divert. The emergency room should not be a catch-all for everything. So let's look for specialized services to treat mental health and addictions where people can go to get specialized support they need instead of landing in an emergency room.
Thank you, Ashlyn. The Association of Municipalities of Ontario is calling for a new deal with the province, arguing that cities and towns face too many financial demands without enough revenue sources. Would you support an overhaul of Ontario's municipal funding model, and if so, what might that look like? We'll start with you, Ashlyn.
Thank you. Yes, as I think it was the morning I woke up after winning my city council election that Bill 23 came down. We saw the impact of provincial cuts on the municipalities. It upended our planning department. There's so much cost that goes into just staffing a city to try to adjust to the constant changes that this government has been throwing at us since 2022. We know that things are different in other provinces. In other provinces, the province pays 50% of the operations of transit. Let's do that. Let's make sure that we pay for affordable housing. Those housing costs that land on the property tax owner should not be placed there. And we need the province to pick up their socks and pay what they need to pay to make sure that we have homelessness prevention and housing solutions for the people of our province. We also know that this funding formula of property tax just doesn't cut it. Income taxes go up in Canada, income taxes go up in Ontario, but if you're a senior on a fixed income and your property taxes go up, you could face homelessness. I hear from so many people at their door that because of double-digit property tax increases, because of the downloading and abandonment of the Ford government, they are facing homelessness, and this is not okay. We need to be sure that the province is seen as a partner, but not somebody who takes you for supper and then passes the bill to you and says, I didn't raise taxes, because we know that that's not an accurate picture. It's time that the province steps up, helps cities address the issues that they're facing in their downtowns, in their economies, not just going to Washington, but really listening to business owners in our downtown, listening to the residents and focusing those priorities instead of tunnels under the highway, Highway 413, alcohol and convenience stores. Let's use that money to fund our transit, fund public health, and fund our homelessness and housing solutions.
Thank you, Ashlyn. And over to you, Colleen.
Okay, this is something near and dear as I navigate a $2 billion budget, residents asking us to do more with less. We need a new financial model for municipalities. The model that is being used now does not work. It is outdated. It is not reflected to current time and place. It's based on funding models from 30 years ago. We know within this region, as we've seen the taxes go up, in 2019, $114 million was part of our levy and reserves that was put on taxpayers. 2024, $188 million that is on taxpayers, part of our levy and reserves. And people who know municipalities know we can't run a deficit. So the money has to come from somewhere. We have been calling, we have been asking for help, we've been sitting at a table making sure to lobby for a new municipal model. It's one of the things I personally feel strongly about because this is not sustainable. And I know that affordability is a huge crisis for many in this region. When I get the emails from seniors who say that they cannot afford a 9.4% tax increase, and I can say, reluctantly, I had to approve it because you know what's going to happen? The people who need those services and will, if we don't fund it, there's no services to provide for people because the province isn't doing their fair share. The estimated impact of the levy and the reserves going into 2025 is $214 million onto taxpayers. That's not okay. And it's not an issue for the taxpayers. This is from the province not providing the funding that is needed, and a new financial deal is required. This is what I feel strongly about, our party feels strongly about. We have a leader who was a mayor who understands. And the reality is, there are services that are being taken away that the province should be doing and that isn't doing. And then, you can't do that to communities. We know that there are vital services we need. A new financial model is needed. I'll advocate for that.
Thank you, Colleen. Many couples in long-term care are being separated due to placement policies, creating emotional distress for elderly partners. Would you support legislation ensuring couples can remain together in the same facility, and how would you advocate for this issue? We'll start with you, Colleen.
Absolutely. I firmly believe that couples should be together. This should, separating people in a time where they need having comfort, having a space with their partner. Why do that to individuals? And I do believe there is a legislation that's tabled that has been ignored, and I would fully support that. As we age, and we know that with a lot of seniors, isolation also helps deteriorate the health, also part of our health care and the impacts on health. We know that when people are together, that that helps prolong life? And why penalize a person or an individual and not allowing them to stay with their partner and age gracefully and respectfully? Because I think at the end of the day, it comes down to respect. I'd be happy to support legislation and work with others on ensuring that the policy reflects the current place and time that we are at too. I'm also recognizing as well the systemic barriers that may exist to that. So how do we alleviate that? Does it come down to a financial aspect? Are there avenues within policy that we can ensure that if they're in place together, we're reducing the financial burden? There are so many different avenues. I do believe that it is important. It is part of respect for our aging populations, as well as culturally sensitive as well, because not all environments understand the cultural nuance. So I think there is work to be done there, and I absolutely support it and think that, again, it's a failure of our healthcare system in not ensuring that those needs and the respect for those who are aging and want to age with their partners is prioritized.
Thank you, Colleen. Over to you, Ashlyn.
Yes, unfortunately, I would support keeping couples together, of course. But I think it speaks to the desperateness of the situation that a government has forced this upon people. What we know is that the government set very ambitious targets to build long-term care beds. We're facing baby boomers that are aging. They call it a silver tsunami. So we're going to see more and more people needing more and more care, facing complex health issues, and a bigger demand on landlord long-term care. I visit Sunnyside on a regular basis, and what I hear from them is the only way into the LTC at Sunnyside, our only regional not-for-profit long-term care, is from the emergency list. We know that because there isn't alternate levels of care. Let's prevent people from needing long-term care in the first place. Oftentimes it's not a necessity. They move to long-term care and then they end up moving to supportive housing or independent living once they've been able to recover from their health issue. I can't tell you how many people have come to my office worried about their loved one who has deteriorated in a hospital hallway, waiting to go to a long-term care. And then, hopefully we're lucky to get enough, the proper healthcare they need to bounce back. This is a big failure because most of our dollars are going into a privatized economy, our privatized sector of long-term care. In the 90s, I believe it was Mike Harris Sr., privatized long-term care and home care. That's why the wheels are falling off. A lot of our tax dollars this day, I debated the budget for this, and most of our dollars are going into for-profit care because we haven't supported the not-for-profit sector to build more beds, because we can't bake sale for $10 million to get off the ground, and there just isn't enough land. So we need to ensure that we are supporting not-for-profit care, and we also need to support our caregivers. When something falls on their parents, the burnout is real, their time is precious, it affects their health, and let's make sure that they aren't abandoned as well.
Thank you, Ashlyn. And for our final question, how important to you is Ontario's budget deficit? How should we balance A, a desire to eliminate the deficit, and B, a need to provide funding for essential services, and C, a desire to avoid increasing taxes unreasonably? And we'll start with you, Ashlyn.
Yes, what I see so often in government is how big money calls the shots. First of all, we have big money in our political system. This government has increased the amount of money that one can donate to a political party. And what that means is they are mushrooming the amount of money that they used to be able to fundraise in the past. It's not okay that money is so embedded in politics, and we need to look at our lobbying, because oil and gas greed is a big cause of the inflation that we see, and we are subsidizing so often the oil and gas infrastructure and letting oil and gas have a free ride. Enbridge goes, unlike other provinces, Enbridge can build and use municipal lands for free. We're not charging them anything. We have a government that has intervened with the Ontario Energy Board, a body that's there to look out for customers. They intervened and turned it over. Why? Because Enbridge and this government are in it together. We see that with the gouging of big grocers. We see that with big developers as well. We would cancel the 413. This is a highway beside an empty highway that will save people about 30 seconds. This is a $10 billion-dollar waste of money that will pave through the wetland that protects us from extreme weather. It will lead to sprawl development that leads to 2.5 times more cost to municipalities than building within the countryside line. And we're paving over the farmland that feeds us at a time when this Trump government to the south is facing us with a massive amount of insecurity. Don't we want to protect our farmland to ensure that we have food to eat? So we will invest in a food belt to ensure that we protect that farmland. We will cancel the Ontario Place deal, which is a waste of money, and it's an Austrian spa at a time when we want to buy Canadian. Why are we giving up our waterfront land to an Austrian spa? So let's cut the waste. We shouldn't have done the $3 billion, $200 checks. We should be investing in the healthcare and education that people tell us they need.
Thank you, Ashlyn. And for you, Colleen.
Yeah, so thank you for that question, because I think, when we think about deficits and we think about, how we balance budgets, we need to ensure we're investing in the right things. And right now, our provincial government is not investing in the things that matter to people. It's not making informed decisions. We don't need to spend $1.9 billion on booze in corner stores. We don't need to spend $100 million providing it to the states, taking away from our economy with our Starlink contract. That needs to be completely ripped up. The snap and closure of the Ontario Science Centre and this spa, that's investment that's going outside of this province to foreign investment. And I know for a fact that $59 million of that money for that spa could be helping with our unhoused population, to be helping to build supportive housing, to be helping to address our transit needs and infrastructure needs that are crumbling. People don't mind being in debt if it's for the right things. We are in debt, and we need to counter this and defeat this for the wrong reasons. We should not be having a government that feeds the pockets of those who are already benefiting from a system. When people benefit from a system, they are not going to change it. I am about change. This party's about change. We want to ensure that this is not the status quo going forward for the next 4 years. Nobody in our community, in our province, and in Kitchener can afford this right now. I also want to say, at the risk of sounding too extreme, we need to invest in our healthcare, in our education, and our small businesses to support the economy that needs to help. Because if we don't have that local economy, we won't be able to have thriving communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. And so we'll now move into closing statements. We'll start with you, Colleen James, for the Liberal Party.
Thank you. It is an honor to serve the members and the residents of Kitchener. I put my name forward because I see a trajectory that does not look good over the next 4 years. I firmly believe that the work that I do, the advocacy and the platform that we have, we're in the position to get something done. Yes, work with many parties, but the reality is in 7 years, things have gotten worse. And many years ago, I worked for Harris Senior, and I saw the mess that came from defunding healthcare, defunding education, and I'm seeing that same thing happen now. And what I take this to is bad policy. And if we don't have people in there that are listening to communities, that are taking what they hear from communities and bringing it to the table and actually getting something done, we're just going to continue these same patterns. I've been proven at the region to move the needle in all of the work I do, challenging and cutting away at systems that do not benefit the whole, and ensuring that people who are part of a community are part of the change that happens. There is avenues all the time for people to connect with elected officials. One of the biggest frustration is when we at a regional table, at a government table, are reaching out to elected officials, especially around municipal funding, getting support for our plan to end chronic homelessness, to address the crisis we're in, and we don't hear anything. I am doing this because I'm concerned about the future generations. We don't have people who can afford homes and then think about the youth. And we know that youth are significantly underemployed. We know we need to invest in businesses in the local economy. I am bringing to this role, and will bring as your MPP, that experience of understanding firsthand what municipalities are navigating. My work around equity and policy work is challenging the status quo, ensuring that redesign these systems in a way that matters to everybody in this province and in Kitchener Centre. Thank you.
Thank you. And now for Ashlyn Clancy from the Green Party.
I want to thank Kitchener Centre so much for choosing me in the 2023 election. It's been a pleasure to serve you as your MPP, and I have worked hard to hustle for you. What I mean by that is I have coffee with every MPP I can so that we can get past some of the partisan politics and make sure that I can deliver for Kitchener Centre. And I've shown to have listened. I go door to door, trying to knock on every door in the riding to be sure that I interact with people from all walks of life in all parts of this riding. We are focused on fairness in the Green Party. We have brought boldness and solutions to move the political needle. We are the first party to have said that we will double OW and ODSP, and it led to an increase and it being marked to inflation. We were the first party to talk about moving trucks off the 401 and onto the 407 as a way to alleviate congestion right now. I continue to work with my colleague, Mike Morris, who's our MP for Kitchener Centre, to ensure that we hold this government accountable to deliver two-way all-day go. I meet with Metrolinx on a quarterly basis to ensure that I get regular updates and I push them to do more. I will always put people over partisan politics. My job is not to be a leader's voice in the riding or a rich donor's voice in the riding, but to ensure that I bring your voice to Kitchener Centre. You're the boss, and I make sure that I bring your voice, and you tell me what to say, and you tell me how to vote. That is what I commit to, and I've committed to delivering for you. I made a commitment in this by-election to make sure I push back against illegal evictions, and that's why I proposed the Keeping People Housed Act to change legislation to ensure no renter paying their rent is illegally rent-evicted, and to put an end to above-guideline increases that are squeezing folks with disabilities and seniors out of their homes. I lobbied for school nutrition, and we have $108 million of school nutrition dollars coming to the province of Ontario. I want to keep delivering for you and ensure that I fight for fairness to make sure I bring your voice to Queen's Park.
Thank you, Ashlyn. Thank you, both of you. Colleen and Ashlyn, I know firsthand that putting your name on a ballot is not easy, and I just want to show my appreciation for you taking the time to speak to the residents of Kitchener Centre and to the platforms that you both offer. And to everybody who is tuning in, thank you for spending your evening with us. Thank you for spending your time to learn about this, and please do not forget to vote on February 27th.